Okay, well, we would love to know some of your early beginnings. I'm real interested. Where were you born?
I was actually born in Haight Ashbury. I was born at St. Joseph's Hospital, which is the big, I guess it's a retirement home or something, up the hill, top of the hill. Fringe of the Haight Ashbury.
And where were you living at that time? Where did you come home to?
My parents were living up on Twin Peaks, I think.
Great.
Yeah.
What were your parents' names and where were they from?
My father's name was Herbert Resner, and my mother's name was Dorothy. They're both Russian Jews. Both their families immigrated from the Ukraine around the turn of the century. Both their families went to Chicago. Both their families wound up migrating to Southern California. My dad went to Pasadena High, and then he went on to the University of California, as did my mother. So it's kind of one of those synchronicity things that nobody knew was happening. And
what kind of work did your father do?
He was an attorney. He went to Bolt Hall at Cal. Graduated in 1935, I think, 34, 35. And, this was a time of labor unrest in the United States and in San Francisco. The general strike was not long after that. And the first thing he did when he got out of school was go to work for the campaign to free Tom Mooney, who was a, cause celeb of that period.
Exactly.
And in fact, I was named after Tom Mooney. My given name is Tom. I changed it in 1966.
Amazing. Were you an only child? Do you have any brothers and sisters?
I have a brother, Bill, who died in 1981. And I have a sister, Virginia, who lives here in the Haight, who's 4 years younger than me.
Wonderful. When you were going to school, you went to school in San Francisco?
I went to Presidio Hill School, good commie school over here in Presidio Heights. I did a lot of the, kids of the lefties back in those days. And this is in the, mid to late 40s. I went to U.S. Grand Elementary School in Pacific Heights. And then we moved to Los Angeles in 1950. And I went to a series of schools there, came back to San Francisco. My mother died in 1955. My father relocated back here around 57 and went to Lowell High School.
Ah.
And then
the old Lowell High School.
The old Lowell High School on Hay Street, right?
Right.
And went there for my freshman year, and then my family life was a little weird. My father had a crazy girlfriend that played horses and really didn't want kids around. And my brother and I went to Santa Fe Military Academy, which was a military school across the bay in Santa Fe.
Wow.
And then I came back to Lowell for my senior year, graduated from Lowell.
Amazing. Did you have time for any higher education or college or any vocational schools?
I was into journalism at the time, and I was actually the editor of the Red and White, or one of the editors of the Lowell Yearbook. Was the editor of the paper. I got a journalism scholarship to the University of Nevada in Reno, of all places, and I went there for a year, and then I met Allen Ginsberg poetry and Miles Davis music, and that was the end of that.
When did you first start coming to the Haight Ashbury?
Well, just a quick little bit of background there. In '65, of course, we had this whole rock and roll scene unleashed here in San Francisco with the Matrix and the Trips Festival down at Longshoreman Hall, and the other thing down that Graham did, South of Market.
The Carousel Ballroom, which became the Fillmore West.
And Fillmore West, and Chet and Bill and all of that. And
sure.
We were very, very excited, like everybody was, about the dance concert scene, as it was called then. And we decided we wanted to do shows ourselves. However, the available venues were taken.
When you say we, who are you speaking of?
We being the gentleman in this photograph. Let's see if we can display it where you want it.
It's perfect. You can get a close-up of it.
I have to look at it again to tell you left or right. But in any event, it's me, my brother Bill Resner, Luther Green, Gene Williams, who goes by the name of Reggie, and Jim Wilson. We're
When was
5
this
or
photo taken about?
Hmm?
When was this photo taken about?
This photo was taken by Jim Marshall in probably 1967. Yeah. And can I put it down?
Yes, wonderful.
Yeah, we were looking for a place. I can't remember what places we might have looked at or
Sure.
explored. But on one legendary day in 1966, I think around March or April, Reggie Williams was tripping through the Haight, quite literally, on some unknown amount of
Hallucinogen.
LSD,
Yes.
and came walking down the hill and on the Haight Street, and lo and behold, there was the Haight Theater, all boarded up like this photograph, and that was a
might even have looked the way it looks now because this was a photo taken before you were involved with it.
Right.
It was a theater that was closed for a long
Right.
time. Do you know what happened in that theater when it was open? What kind of a theater was it?
Yeah. Well, we know a little, and a couple other people you'll be talking to can tell you more. But of course, it was a depression era movie palace. With the all of the motifs of goddesses and gods and chariots and
Right.
all of that painted on the ceiling and the sconces on the walls and that environment. And I guess it had been a successful theater in the 30s and the 40s and up into the 50s when the Haight itself started to fall on hard times.
Sure.
And which is well documented. And there were less patrons, and it then went to a succession of occupants, not owners. The theater itself was owned by the Spreckles family.
Gotcha.
The very wealthy Sugar family.
Sugar family, yes.
In Pacific Heights, and they leased it out, I guess, to a succession of people. It had been a storefront Baptist church, I believe, a black church, and then it had been a gay theater, and maybe I guess it was probably the first gay theater.
Wow.
In San Francisco, showing what kind of movies, I have no idea.
Right.
We found a lot of movie posters,
In the theater.
when we took over the place, but they were all, your standard variety,
Right.
John Wayne and,
Right.
Bogey and what have you.
So, do you know when, by any chance, would you know when that theater opened, or when it was built, or anything?
I don't really, I probably did it one time, but
Right.
no longer do know the history. But actually, Reggie Williams is sort of the street theater archivist, if you
Wonderful.
will, and he's the guy who will know if anybody does.
Exactly. So here Reggie spots this theater, and one day he's skipping on Haight Street, and
Yes. So Reggie, I'm not quite. I guess what happened is he went into the hardware store, which was McFarland's Hardware, which was at the bottom of the Masonic Temple,
Right.
which was an old building next door and then a Masonic Hall.
Right.
And
later became the I-beam.
exactly.
Right. Okay.
And Reggie discovered that McFarland had the keys. McFarland, the theater was for rent, and so McFarland was able to show it to people. So Reggie went in, and the place was, pretty wrecked. I mean, it had been vandalized. All the copper wire had been ripped out of the theater. The whole place was in disrepair. There was water, as he tells it, like several inches of water, standing in front of the stage. And
It had to be a labor of love. Oh my goodness.
oh yes. And I'm sure it was moldy as can be and dank and dark and all of that.
Right.
But of course, Reggie, instantly visualized something much grander than that,
Right.
and came back and informed probably my brother Bill. They were very tight, and about what he found. And within weeks, we had leased it for the princely sum of $500 a month.
Wow.
Yeah. Which won't get you too far in the entertainment business these days.
So was that the amount of you had to pay for the rent every month?
I think it was
Did it go up?
500. It might have been 7, but the number that I remember is 500.
500. Amazing.
Yeah.
But in those days, you could rent a whole house for $100.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and we all,
Or less.
when we moved into the neighborhood, which we did, we lived up on Downey Street. Had a flat up on Downey, the alley, like straight up the hill. And yeah, that was probably 50 or 75.
A month.
God knows,
right.
you know, it wasn't
Exactly.
much. Or, you know,
Exactly.
4 or 5 of us were living.
So, what, if you personally, and there was many people involved, you personally, were you bitten by any of what was going on the street? Were you part of the wave? Did you feel
Well, you know,
some reasons to be
there
there?
There were a couple of waves on Haight, of immigration, if you will, to Haight Street, you know, and a couple of generations, or more than a couple, of bohemians, let's say, let's use that as the generic term, you know, because you had your beats with whom, you know, I had hung out when I bailed out of the University of Nevada. You know, I had made friends in North Beach, and you know, these are the people that were, you know, 10 years older than us.
Came
right?
from North Beach, yes.
And in our group, you know, we were all born around, you know, 1942, 43, during the war. And, you know, we're the age of Bob Dylan and Paul McCartney and
Sure.
you know, all of those people. And we're kind of like the interregnum, if you will, between the Beats and the hippies.
Right.
And, you know, I mean, there was no such thing as a hippie. And we were just people that thought it would be really cool to have a place to
Sure.
put on shows, and had no clue of what Haight Street was going to turn into.
Right.
You know, thank God.
Thank God, right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And
what was, real quickly, in a few lines, some of the problems before opening?
well,
And
the
then
biggest problem was we didn't have any money.
Right.
You know, literally. And we went out foraging. I mean, each of us had a specific role. Loser was not there for the entire time because Loser took a sabbatical, and he might want to tell you about or not.
Sure, sure.
But Bill and Reggie were kind of like the, quote, business guys, unquote.
Right.
And I was the person who booked the bands, and so I was getting to know the bands and figuring out. Of course, I thought we were going to open in a couple months. You know,
Sure.
calling people up, and they're going, "Oh yeah."
How
call
long
us when
was
you're
it
ready."
between finding it and actually opening it?
I'm sorry.
How long was it between actually finding the location
It was
and
between
opening?
April of 1966 and July of 1967. So I mean, literally, it took us, you know,
A year.
15 months to, you know, fix up the place. I mean, I have.
And then finding the money for rent and supplies.
It was literally a weekly thing, just like everybody else was going through, just trying to live, right? But what we did was started going out and finding kindred spirits who thought it would be a cool thing, you know, to
Sure.
participate in. And we got a lot of investors. We had, I don't know how many, you know, more than 10, maybe 20, but they included rock bands, the Quicksilver Messenger Service, Ron Pulte, and
Sure.
you know, those guys
Sure.
were investors. Big Brother and the Holding Company, Julius Carpin, those people.
Sure.
Jay Ward, believe it or not, the guy that created Bullwinkle,
Mm-hmm.
you know. Eventually Albert Grossman. You know, it was a kind of a word of mouth thing.
Sure.
There was a guy connected with us named Stephen White who had been a screenwriter in Hollywood for the Bob Hope Show. In fact, I have another picture here.
Sure, we'd love to see it.
Here's a photograph that was taken in the back lot behind the Masonic Temple.
Kind of hold it to your fingers to the edges.
Yeah,
There
sorry.
we go.
Um,
Where was this taken now?
Can you
In the
get
back
that?
lot?
This was
Behind the
taken
Masonic
behind the
Temple.
theater, next door to the theater, behind the Masonic Hall. But this is, you know, a group shot. I've got a whole bunch of these in different poses of people who were involved, helping us put the theater together and, you know, build it and renovate it
Volunteers
and all of
and
that.
support, yes.
You know, it was a pretty crazy crew. But in any case, we recruited a bunch of people to give us money. You know, I imagine that Steve White is who turned it on to Jay Ward because of the Hollywood connection.
Right.
But you know, through the rock and roll bands, of course, we got in, and there were, you know, various pot dealers and other people, you know,
Sure.
certainly came forward in the spirit
Help
of
the community.
Aquarian, you know, giving and
Exactly.
helped to finance the Straight Theater. You know, we rounded up somewhere around $100,000 during the course of this experience.
Wow.
And I mean, the whole place needed renovating.
Exactly.
But the real story, and it's a hilarious story about the Straight Theater, is that, number one, the city of San Francisco didn't want us to be there. Some things never change.
Right.
You know, they did not want, because at this time now, it was starting to build the whole crazy psychedelic rock and roll scene. And they did not want a dance hall on Haight Street that was going to attract all these characters to the city, or would help attract. So they made the permit process, you know,
Very
beyond
difficult.
hard. They made the permit process impossible. And so on the one hand, we were busily trying to remodel the place. As I told you, the wiring had all been ripped out. We wound up eventually, we had a guy named Brent Dangerfield who was our sound man. And I think I'll let Luther Green tell you the story of Brent Dangerfield, because
I'll remind him of it.
he can do justice by that one. But, you know, Brent, besides being a golden-throated radio announcer, fancied himself an electrician. Just about anything else, you could chemist, whatever, you know, he might be. And he tried and failed, of course, to rewire the theater. And we had to hire a company named Ever Ready Electric, who was ever ready to take our money. And, you know, but the city kept imposing new requirements.
Sure.
And ultimately, they required that we had to have, I think it was 64 8x8 or 10x10 compartments underneath the dance floor that we were constructing
Sprinklers or something?
in the front of the stage. You know,
that
with a
to do-
fire sprinkler in
Right,
each compartment.
okay, gotcha.
And they were double walled and, you know,
Right.
sheetrock, you know, I mean, it could have all been like little pens for animals or fish or something.
So how did you get around the situation of the permit
Well,
to open?
Well, that's the big story. I mean, first we went to the police department to get a dance permit. They said no, so we went to the Board of Permit Appeals. And actually, let me get
Sure, please.
something from
Take your time.
book. Because as you guys know, the Board of Permit Appeals is the arbiter and the final decision-making group.
And now in 2005, we've just got a music commission, which has never been in San Francisco. So times are changing. 2005.
Yeah.
When issues like this come up, you have now.
40 years.
Yes, now start to have some support.
It was a real battle. You know, the city was against us. The media was chronicling this. You know, this whole book of clippings. But in any event, it came down to this dramatic, hearing, a final hearing, because I think we had two. I think there was, one where they said, okay, well, we'll think about it and come back and have another one. And it got to the point where we had such people as Dame Judith Anderson, who was Luther Green's stepmom. Dame Judith Anderson was, one of the great ladies of the theater. And Dame Judith literally came to the hearing and testified about how the Straight Theater would help to bring culture to these huddled masses of hippies.
Right.
You know. And
So what was the final? What happened?
the upshot of it was that permit was denied.
So how were you able to open?
And well, we were stymied for a while. We wanted to open because the place was basically ready to go. We had a beautiful sound system which was supplied, by the way, by Owsley Stanley, from Grateful Dead fame. We had a cyclorama screen, went from almost the floor practically all the way up to the ceiling, went 180 degrees around. It was a fantastic place for its time.
Sure.
It was cooler than the Fillmore in that respect, because it was designed for
It was for the people. It was on
and there
the
was a
street
balcony,
for the people.
for the light shows and all
Sure.
that stuff. And Reggie Williams, by the way, did the light shows, which was called Reginald and Straight Lightning. And
Did you remember Brian Epps being there doing some lights sometime?
I do. I remember.
yeah.
Yeah.
I lost my train.
No, we're talking about how did you finally open?
Oh yeah. So
Yes.
we wound up actually having our opening weekend with folding chairs, you know, on the dance floor. And we had, you know, there were still theater seats. We didn't pull them all out. There was, you know, a number of rows of theater seats, and then there was a dance floor. But we had folding chairs on the dance floor, which was a lot of fun. But we, you know, had a great opening day weekend. I don't have that poster, but, you know, the Dead played, and Big Brother played, and Quicksilver played, and the Wildflower, you know, a lot of the, you know, famous bands at the time.
Sure.
And while we're, you know, people are sitting in seats, you know, it's really cool. That couldn't go on too long, so
people were dancing in their seats.
And I don't know who came up with this idea, but it sounds, it may have been Luther Green, that there was a way that we could get by this and open the theater for dancing, and that was to become a dance school.
Great idea.
Dancing academy.
What were the musicians on the stage? Dance teachers?
Well, when that finally happened, and I don't know the date, and maybe Luther can tell you that, when we had, because that was the really monumental, you know, denouement of this whole thing, when we opened the Straight Theater School of the Dance. And when people lined up, you know, to buy not their tickets, but to register, to become
students.
See, here's Luther Green and Dame Judith Anderson. So you can see Luther was a front man. Okay, now, you know, one thing about, in one book about the Haight, Charlie Perry's book, just called Haight Ashbury, I believe he referred to Luther as movie star handsome Luther Green. Anyway.
That's wonderful. So the first show was all bands playing and people on seats, and that evolved?
Yeah. Keeping It Straight, a dancing lesson.
That's great. That's priceless. Because I know when Bill Graham got his dance hall keeper's permit, he had a lot of trouble. I was Bill Graham's archivist. And he couldn't let people under 16 in. He kind of changed the law through that whole thing. And it was very difficult in those days. They don't call it dance hall keeper's permit anymore. But it used to be to open a venue and have people in there, a dance hall keeper's permit. And, it was very archaic because all the rules were in place from the 20s and the 30s.
So anyway, it was wild. I mean, because here are the police, here's the district attorney, crawling all over the place, consulting, you know, the code. And our lawyer at the time was a young man named Terry Hallinan.
Right. Still around.
The lawyer of the street DA, later the DA of San Francisco. So Terry was there to talk to them and explain to them that, you know, dance schools did not require permits.
No.
And actually the
Great
city,
idea.
They thought about legislating, you know, a requirement for dance halls to be licensed. Dance schools to be licensed.
Sure.
And that didn't fly. And so, you know, they kind of just eventually looked the other way. And, you know, there was so much going on out here in the Haight. There's so much craziness going on. At least, you know, I mean, we were trying to pretend like we were a legitimate business.
Right.
You know, we weren't camping in doorways, you know what I mean? And, you know, sleeping in the parks. So at least they knew where we were. We weren't going anywhere.
Right, exactly.
Ask them about the nude dance.
Okay. I have a question I'm going to ask you. I'm going to be. We have about 10 minutes left on this interview, and we're going to have you join a group interview in a little while to get more information. But I'd like to know about the nude dance. That's very curious. And then I also would like to know maybe 2 or 3 of your favorite events that happened there.
Well, that's
maybe
definitely
share
one
that.
of them.
Okay, share a little bit of that with me, and then I'd really like to know a little bit more about you besides the Straight Theater.
Okay. I'll try not to digress too much.
No problem.
The nude dance occurred, I tried to find the police report because it's a masterpiece. You know, it says on a police report they have a line that says weapon, tool, or method used, and it says dancing in the nude. And I managed a band at that time called All Men Joy while I was still working for the theater, and I was also the master of ceremony.
Sure.
And so All Men Joy fancied themselves. The guitar player was a big, tall African-American guy named Roger, who sort of fancied himself, you know, kind of cross between Jimi Hendrix and Pete Townsend or something like that, you know. They like to destroy their instruments every night. Of course, we had no money, that made it tough. But they had started talking about, wouldn't it be cool if, you know, we took our clothes off and got the audience to take their clothes off as well. And at a certain point, that's what they did, you know. They played the, I forget what band was it, 13th Floor Elevators, You're Gonna Miss Me.
Right.
You know, I think that was their big number, you know, that they played while they were bashing their instruments. And they, you know, one of them, probably Roger, said, come on, people, get loose. Come on, take it off, take your clothes off. And the police report, as they describe it, they came by the theater. It was after hours. The doors were locked. They banged on the door. There were little diamond-shaped, you know, windows in the doors, trying to attract our security guard, they called a special. And special would not respond, you know. Finally, the special came to the door. We pushed, no, we wouldn't say pushed, you know. We entered the theater. We walked down. We walked down the aisle. There were two cops, and we observed, you know, a dozen or more patrons dancing in various states of disrobement, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm not sure how they stopped the music. Maybe the music just stopped when the band saw, you know, cops coming, and of course they got their clothes on and got the hell out of there. None of them got busted. Right. But I got busted. And one of the patrons who'd taken off his clothes, some poor guy, he was there in his skivvies, you know, he was a school teacher from Campbell or someplace.
Oh, no.
And so they busted him and me and walk us over to Park Station. Of course, I'm clothed, you know. This poor guy is wearing his shorts in the fog, in the dark, you know, at night, and 1 in the morning or whatever, in June or July.
Did they take you to jail? Did they?
And yeah, they booked us both for, you know, it's a sex crime.
Indecent
exposure. I guess I'm a sex offender, you know what? But somehow nobody ever managed to find out.
Right. in public, yeah.
Anyway, basically the charges got dropped, but it was a wonderful evening.
To me, this is just a statement of the time. People were taking their clothes off. They were dancing in the streets, the music, the light shows, trying to find a better way to love each other instead of fighting and finding things they agree on. I also know that you've done some work in the recording industry as well, and been involved with Mix Magazine, is it?
Right. Well, I mean, I remained involved with music when we bailed out of here. Just to put a cap on it, we leased the theater, rented it to Matthew Case. You know,
that's a whole interview in itself.
Founder and the guy that you know owned their name and all of that. Right. And Matthew promoted concerts under the name of the banner of San Francisco Sound, which he also, of course, had trademarked. Right. And but we left. He wasn't here that long before he closed and then we boarded up.
So Matthew Cates took it over after you guys?
I don't know that he kept it.
Right.
Maybe one of the other guys can address it because I don't remember.
Sure.
But anyway, we migrated to Pacific Heights on Fillmore Street, where we got a storefront, which had been a frame shop. And behind the frame shop, behind the storefront, my sister opened and a friend opened a used clothing boutique, and called Paisley Penguin Fine Trippery. Probably the first counterculture, business
alternative
on Upper Fillmore.
Clothing,
this is Fillmore and Clay, right next door to the Clay Theater, and behind it was the shop where the framing people worked, and it was just concrete floors and the skylights and all that kind of thing. And we put in a rehearsal studio, rented it some of our friends who were bands, Nick Ravenitis, Alice Stewart and Snake, and people like that. And then at a certain point, one of the bands that had played a lot at the Strait, who were good friends of ours, was Santana. Sure. And my father had actually, when they had left Graham, my father became their attorney. My dad was a lawyer.
Amazing.
My dad negotiated their second contract with Columbia. We were very tight with Santana, so Santana rented the place and spent, this is during the Abraxas period, and I lived upstairs You know, while these guys were rehearsing the Braxis, I know every note of that album by heart.
Is it 120 or 60?
Anyway, they.
You have so many stories to tell. I would love to keep hearing
I'll
them.
wrap this really quickly. They spent a lot of money to make a beautiful recording studio. Unfortunately, it wasn't a soundproofed recording studio. And next door there was a sculptor, a society sculptor, who was tip-tapping away on his marble or metal or whatever he was doing.
Every day hearing.
He raised hell with the landlord. They had to leave. I wound up with a recording studio. And a friend of mine, a guy named Billy Roberts, who wrote the song Hey Joe, whom I managed, and I started, we took over this place and started recording in there. He eventually moved on. I invested a lot of money and, put a studio together. And then at a certain point, couldn't make a living doing that, and went to work for Mix Magazine, which started in 1977.
You already had this background management.
Yeah, so I had
venue
and
experience.
Mix Magazine, was a director of recording studios.
So is a big part of you is it audio skills that you have as far as?
Well, I mean, I'm a writer and an editor. I had been in journalism in the first place, and I worked at the Chronicle as a copy boy with not Sullivan, but John Stanley and some of those guys at the Chronicle.
Sure.
So I had those skills, but I actually became their first ad salesman, and eventually became the publisher and then the editor-in-chief of Mix Magazine.
Great magazine. I've seen it through the industry for years.
It's the magazine for recording people.
Yes, it is. It's a great magazine.
And then back in '96, I couldn't, magazines had been sold like 4 times. I couldn't take the corporate idiots who were running it, and I resigned as publisher and took over a foundation that we had started called the Mix Foundation for Excellence in Audio, which produces a big award show every year for the recording industry called the Technical Excellence and Creativity Awards, or TEC.
You have them in different
TEC,
areas, in different places.
And that's what I do. I produce this show.
What is the
every year.
Does it have a website?
It does. It's mixfoundation.org. Last year we had it in San Francisco, the show, and we honored George Lucas.
That's great.
And Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis and.
Are you involved with any other websites that we should know about? Are you involved with any other websites? Does the Straight Theater have a website?
The Straight Theater has a website. The Straight Theater doesn't have a website. Reggie Williams has a website called thestraight.com.
Okay.
And but to the extent that there's anything out there, that's what it is, and it's interesting. It's
But it's
the
a good
thing
place.
is, it's still there. It still has the flavor. I will say that it has a really good 1967.
Because if
flavor.
anybody seeing this in the future has information, or somebody that's worked there or been there, there's at least a place to connect to. Yeah.
Well, and Reggie sells posters. Okay, so part of it is that he's merchandising posters.
Of course.
He did manage to wind up with a lot of posters from the Straight. And by the way, I have a number of Straight Theater posters, including.
I'm going to invite you back in a little while in
Okay.
a group discussion, and a lot of the things you brought, and we will make sure that all of them are seen.
Cool.
And it's an honor to have you here. And my name is Rebecca Nichols, and I am privileged to have you here documenting history firsthand. This is a very, very important project that we're in the middle of, documenting the 60s in the Haight Ashbury. If it weren't for people like yourself and other people you worked with, a lot of the magic would not have happened. People would have danced to this song or to that music, but one of the things that you did, and many others that we haven't even gotten to, helped focus people in their day to what they were going to be doing, and helped create the normality and the thread of sanity through the flexible days of who knows what we're going to do
You could
today.
conduct these interviews for 100 years. Okay?
Exactly.
And not get it all out.
But we're so pleased to have someone that has been there, can tell it from his feeling, his appreciation, and his commitment to building something. And that is where we are now. We are living in the from all the actions that have taken place, where we all are.
That's right.
And where we are right now. And so we're so pleased to have you here, and we're going to have you back in a little while.
Okay.
To make it to have the rest of more conversation between all of you.
Okay.
And I just want to thank you so much to be part of this. And besides asking you back, we will be asking you back again.
Okay.
This is a long-going project, documenting all of this information. And when it's documented, it will be made available for research. And one last question. 50 years from now, somebody watches this tape
Oh, God.
and sees where someone like you, seeing a venue like this, a theater like this, no money, no anything, but a lot of hopes and dreams. What word or sentence of advice could you give young people listening to this video, as they will be 50, 100 years from now?
I'll just borrow from Nike. Just do it.
That's great. Thank you so much.